Hello, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino and Resort. And today's kind of that day where you sort of crest the top of the roller coaster ride. They call it Hump Day for a reason, which means we're all downhill from here, heading straight towards Saturday and the SEC Championship game in downtown Atlanta. Of course, I've got the hover helping on the desk today. Our buddy Eddie is here as well. I know we promised Sean Bailey yesterday. We were able to catch up with Bailey after the show. Sean's going to be with us here on today's show. We'll talk to him about the win in 2005, how he thinks these Georgia receivers will perform this year. Sean's really excited about the game. You'll like that from him. Mike Griffith's going to be with us here in a bit as well. And I'm going to start the show this way. I would never try to insult your intelligence by telling you that I know for a fact that Georgia's going to win on Saturday. I just have too much respect for you to kind of throw that kind of grift at you. I'm just not going to do that. But I absolutely will not allow my own intelligence to be insulted either. The people who tell me that Georgia's got no chance of winning this game, I'm not really quite sure what data they're looking at, what evidence they're citing to back that up. This is a game on Saturday that is very difficult to predict, and one that Georgia has a chance to win. And we'll talk about that today and the rest of the week. Really glad to have you with us. Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. It begins right now.
Today's episode of Dog Nation Daily is brought to you by Harris Cherokee Resort. Find us online at Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee.
Presented by DogNation.com. This is Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I say it frequently, it's worth saying again. I try to be a good person in life. I've given up a long time ago on the notion of being perfect. Too many examples of me falling short of that standard. And one of the examples in which I am an imperfect person, and this is true for a lot of people who speak into microphones for a living, there's probably a little bit of an ego. There's probably a little bit of I don't really even know what the right way to say it is. But on my own show, my own platform, I don't give up the floor on that very easy. I don't yield my time to other people to speak very much. I like giving my opinion. That's why I do this each and every day. But sometimes somebody says something so perfectly that you have to say, you know what? In this particular instance, couldn't have said it any better myself. With Georgia getting ready to take on LSU on Saturday, we have an example of that. It's former Georgia offensive lineman George Foster on social media. He's a pretty active guy on Twitter as it is. A lot of tweets are pretty funny. He doesn't hold back on his opinion. And he tweeted something that I thought perfectly summed up what I think the feeling ought to be among Georgia fans as we head towards the SEC Championship. Here's George Foster on Twitter, the former Dogs offensive lineman, saying, "It's wild how we don't have a chance versus a team that gave up," this is in all caps, 614 yards to Ole Miss. Foster goes on to say that Ole Miss is big garbage. Big, he says. Just let the game be played, man, and let it be what it be. That's George Foster on Twitter. And listen, I completely agree with George on that this is one of those games that's not as easy to predict as some people think that it is. And I am more than happy, speaking as myself here for a moment, I am more than happy to be comfortable just letting it play out, thinking that Georgia has a chance to win, understanding why some people might pick LSU, and let's just see. As I've been saying now all week long, to me it looks like a fair fight. In a fair fight, you roll up your sleeves, and you go out there and see who the better guy is on that particular day, and that's what's going to happen on Saturday. And if you'll permit me to be kind of a philosophical blowhard for just 1 second, one of the things that makes human beings kind of contradictory is that we simultaneously crave certainty and uncertainty. And you can think about a lot of examples of this in your own life. There's been a lot of research done to kind of back up this point. We at the same time want to be certain of what's going to happen, and at the same time want the mystery of uncertainty, the excitement that comes from a surprise. We watch sports because of the uncertainty. When we tune in to see games, we don't know how they're going to play out. We don't know what's going to happen. We're honestly curious to see. However, the absence of knowledge about how the games are going to end at a certain point in time, that makes us nervous. It makes us anxious. And you can see this not just with Georgia football fans and Georgia football games or SEC football fans and SEC championship games, but all walks of life and anything involving sports. We have a tendency to project certainty, kind of over confidently assume that we know how games are going to play out. It's the reason why if you go to Las Vegas, there's those towers, those gigantic palaces, those casinos. They have made money over the course of decades on people's inability to measure just how truly certain they ought to be about an outcome. And with sports, we have a tendency to say, oh, yeah, LSU is the favorite team, therefore they are definitely going to win and Georgia is definitely going to lose. But the people who assume that, I think are just kind of getting that wrong all the way around. And as much as I'd love to sort of bang on the national media for this, as much as I'd love to kind of find a villain out there outside the bubble of Dog Nation and really hammer them for this, the honest truth is it's Georgia fans just as much as anything who seemingly have underrated Georgia's chances of winning the game on Saturday. Not all Georgia fans, but a pocket of them. I tweeted yesterday something about something that Jeff Sentell had written. He'd kind of looked at the 4- and 5-star recruits that Georgia and LSU have amassed over the last 5 years. Over the last 4 years over that span, big advantage for UGA, at least in terms of recruiting. What I tweeted out yesterday was talent matters. UGA has and I put this in parentheses, slight edge versus LSU. It's one of the main reasons I think the Dogs can win on Saturday. I got some pushback from that from some Georgia fans who thought I was overrating the role that recruiting might play in a game like this because they cite the star players. What about Clyde Edwards-Helaire? What about Joe Burrow? And I think that decision or that opinion, I think it misunderstands the role that role players play in a game like this. I mean, forget the matchup between Swift compared to Edwards-Helaire or Joe Burrow compared to Jake Fromm. Those are the big star names. Look at all the guys, though, that Georgia plays defensively, not just the starters. I think the notion of being a starter in college football right now is a little bit overrated. Georgia substitutes so much, and when it does substitute, it brings in guys like Nakobe Dean, guys like Trayvon Walker, guys like Nolan Smith. These are some of those elite recruits that Jeff Sentell wrote about yesterday when he made his case at DogNation.com that Georgia has out-recruited LSU. And I want to apologize for thinking that matters in the game on Saturday, not just on the defensive side of the ball, but on the offensive side there as well. When Georgia rotates offensive linemen, think about what its rotation has been. It's Jamari Salyer coming into play sometimes, former 5-star. It's Cade Mays, sometimes a starter, sometimes a reserve, but also a former 5-star. It's Ben Cleveland from the class of 2016, which was not a 5-star, but a very high 4-star, knocking on the door of being a 5-star there himself. Depth matters in games like this. Georgia's depth has been populated by a whole lot of recruiting success, very high 4- and 5-star players. It's not a guarantee that Georgia wins, but it's one of the reasons those who think the Dogs don't have a chance are completely underestimating the situation. I mean, listen, after all, what is the data point that's out there that tells you that LSU is way better than Georgia? I mean, let's do a little comparative stuff here for a moment. The big non-conference win for Georgia was 10-2 Notre Dame, a game played at home. For LSU, it was a road win against 7-5 Texas. What screams LSU dominance in that comparison? LSU did beat Florida by 2 touchdowns. The game was played in Baton Rouge. Georgia won by a touchdown in a neutral site game against the same opponent. LSU in a home game against Auburn won the game by 3. Georgia went on the road against the Tigers, won the game by 7. Now LSU did beat Alabama, and Georgia did suffer a loss to South Carolina, which probably explains the reason why LSU is a favorite in this game. But is that enough to make you think then that Georgia has no chance of winning the game? That's where I stop short of that. That's just a little too much confidence for me about how this game is going to play out. Plus, I think you like the overall demeanor that Georgia brings to the table in a week like this. I love what Kirby Smart said yesterday with the fact that his team is embracing the big stage he gets to play on Saturday, and that you're seeing a little extra energy in practice because of that. This is a great setup from Kirby Smart for what we might see on Saturday. Here's the coach.
I think they're excited about the opportunity to play in front of this was last year's most watched game in all of college football. I mean, there's a lot of passion and energy involved. Atlanta's got a great venue, and the Southeastern Conference is second to none when it comes to fan bases and passion. So I know our players are excited. I am too.
Yeah, he's right there where he needs to be, and I think the fans ought to be excited as well, not because we know that Georgia's going to win, but because we know that Georgia's just got as much a chance to do this thing as any team in the country would in a spot like this. By the way, final number to kind of sum all this up. Bill Conley from ESPN, I have no idea how this math stuff is tabulated. I'm not smart enough to understand this. But in his recent projection for the SEC championship game on Saturday, he gives LSU an edge by 2.6 points. And he gives LSU a 56% chance of winning the game, 56%. That's almost the exact same numbers that the Massey Peabody Index has for the game as well, which just sort of makes me sound smart to even say that. Massey Peabody makes it sound like I'm quite the academician if that's the kind of stuff I'm tossing around. But the point is, these kinds of numbers, 44% chance of winning, 2.6 point edge for the opponent. Does that scream Georgia having no chance? I think George Foster's right, and every Dog fan who thinks that's right there as well. Let's just see how this one plays out. Maybe those who are so sure the dominant LSU offense wins, maybe they'll be proven correct on this, or maybe they won't. I feel like it's going to take 3 or 4 hours with the football on Saturday to determine that one way or another. Now, let me kind of shift gears and talk about something else for a moment. Obviously, a story we've been following all week is the status of Georgia running back DeAndre Swift. Very hopeful when Smart spoke about this on Saturday. Kind of a change in tone when he spoke about that on Monday. Hard to really know exactly what all of that meant. Thankfully, Smart did go into a little bit more detail on the Swift situation when he spoke to reporters on Tuesday night. Let me give you this one first on kind of what Swift is doing right now and how this process is playing out as he battles an injured shoulder.
He's been out there doing what we asked him to do. He's practicing. I mean, he's banged up, man. It's tough, but he's a warrior. He's a fighter, and we're expecting him to be able to go. I mean, he's practicing.
So obviously that's kind of the situation there, expecting him to be able to go, practicing on going through this. And then as far as when the injury occurred and the fact that maybe this wasn't something that just sort of popped up brand new for Swift just in the game against Georgia Tech, here's a little bit more details for Smart on Swift, which I think is helpful for all of us and kind of understanding the nature of the situation. Here's Kirby again.
According to him, we had that same question. It was earlier in the game that he injured and he continued to play. He continued to play with it, and then it just began to hurt more and more and more after that. And that was kind of the culmination of that on that play, where it was like it was bothering him more. But yeah, he's had a banged up shoulder a lot of the year. A lot of our guys. I mean, Brian Herring's had it. We've had a couple players have the similar injury that he has. He has played with it and dealt with it, and it's I won't say it's a common injury, but we have a lot of guys that have had that same injury in football, and he's been dealing with it well, and it came to a head Saturday because he had a couple hits earlier where he did fall on it and it was bothering him.
So listen, I have absolutely no idea what all that means in terms of how healthy Swift's going to be on Saturday, but as someone who thinks that Georgia has a chance to win on Saturday, I won't concede that opinion even if it turns out that DeAndre Swift is less than fully healthy. Obviously, that'd be a huge blow to Georgia's chances of winning. I won't deny that, but back in the offseason, we thought this was a team that had plenty of running back depth. Zamir White, James Cook, obviously Brian Herring, who we've seen a good bit of this season. It could be a day where some of those guys are called on a little bit more, and it wouldn't surprise me if Georgia's still equal to the task against LSU if that's indeed the case. Obviously, DeAndre Swift would be a huge part of the winning formula for the Dogs, but not necessarily the only winning equation on Saturday. We'll follow this story closely and see what Georgia can do with Swift, without him, whatever, to battle the LSU defense this weekend. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Really glad to have you with us, no matter how you get to us. Video, it's 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, radio noon on 960 The Ref, and of course as a podcast, the Apple Player, the Google Player, the world-famous DogNation.com. Just really glad to have you with us, no matter how you get to us on the program here today, and really appreciate Harris Cherokee Casino Resort making it all possible. Y'all know I love this property. 2 great locations, less than a 3-hour drive in Atlanta, whether it's Harris Cherokee Valley River or the original Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. They both provide a lot of great stuff. Beautiful, huge, expansive gaming area. Well-appointed rooms. The Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, it's got over 1,100 rooms. They've also got a spa and like 10 dining options. It's really a world-class getaway, and as I said before, it's only about a 3-hour drive from Atlanta, a little bit less than that, and coming up pretty soon, the Book is going to open. That's right, sports gaming coming to the Harris Cherokee Casino Resort properties there in North Carolina. If you're watching on video, you can see the site on the screen to go to find out more about that, or if you're listening radio podcast, my best advice is just Google this, Harris Cherokee Casino Resort and the Book, sports book. You'll get all the information that you need on that. I'm really excited about that coming up at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort here at the end of this year and throughout 2020 there as well. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right, it's Mike Griffith later on. It's former Georgia wide receiver Sean Bailey coming up here today too. I know we talked about him being on the program yesterday. I'm going to be here today. I've actually already kind of recorded that one, and so we'll get ready to do that with Sean Bailey coming up a little bit later on. For now, let's go around the doghouse. It's brought to you today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and I want to push pause on the SEC championship stuff for a moment and deal with a recruiting storyline that's out there, both kind of the reality of the situation at the moment, also maybe a little bit of optimism about what might take place for the rest of the 2020 class. Corey Wren, the 3-star, I think he's been called a speedster, that's probably a pretty good way to say it, from Louisiana, had announced last night on Twitter that he's decommitting from the Georgia program. Here's, if you're watching on video, I'll show you his tweet. Obviously classy, wishes everyone the best, and he's sort of stepping into a new realm where he's going to go to a different school now. I think that Wren has a chance to be a really good player at the college level. I will also admit that I think it was a weird fit for Georgia Georgia needs receivers. And Wren, while he's going to be potentially classified as that is in college, the truth is he plays for a high school program where they run the ball a lot. And he's played running back for his team. Not the biggest guy in the world necessarily. I've grown to really appreciate him as a prospect. I love every quote I've ever read from him. I think he's tough. I think he's mentally tough and physically tough as well. I think he's going to be a good college player, and I'll look forward to watching him play where he's going to go. It's obviously now not going to be the University of Georgia. When Jeff Sintel, our Dog Nation recruiting insider, when he wrote about this last night at DogNation.com, he also mentioned a couple of things for Georgia in the works that could maybe now be accelerated now that Wren is no longer in Georgia's plans and Wren no longer has Georgia in his own plans. Here's what Jeff Sintel wrote last night at DogNation.com. Check out the site to read the entire thing for yourself. But this is really interesting. Jeff writes that the Bulldogs are also actively pursuing other targets in the 2020 class for that receiver position that Wren was expected to play. Jeff mentions Arian Smith, a four-star prospect, expected to take an official visit to UGA next week. Also, here's a very interesting nugget. First time I believe I've read this at DogNation.com. Jeff said that Georgia also recently hosted four-star LSU commit Jermaine Burton over the last week, too. Longtime listeners of this program know that Burton was a big topic of a conversation for us months ago. Got a close relationship with Terrence Edwards, for instance, and Burton would be a guy that I'd welcome back with open arms here into this 2020 class if he indeed wanted to come. And then Jeff also mentioned Marcus Fleming, the former Miami commit, a four-star receiver who took an official visit for the Texas A&M game. So Georgia needs receivers. That's an area in which Georgia has tried to upgrade its recruiting efforts the last couple of years. And to think that Georgia now with an extra scholarship to kind of play around with here, down the road with Arian Smith, down the road still with Jermaine Burton, still keeping that relationship alive, and potentially something going on with Marcus Fleming there as well. It's no coincidence that the area in which Georgia has had the most issue with on the field is also the area in which they had some issues with recruiting for years and years and years. Georgia probably under-recruited the wide receiver position, maybe paying a little bit of a price for that right now, but given the guys you brought in for the 2019 class, given what could be on the table still yet to come for the 2020 class, Georgia's really, really stepping up its wide receiver recruitment right now. Fun to watch how Arian Smith and Jermaine Burton, Marcus Fleming, how these stories kind of take some twists and turns in the days ahead. And by the way, we'll have Before the Hedges presented by Kroger coming up later on today, where we'll talk even more about that. For now, though, it's Around the Doghouse. It's presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia and, of course, ESOG, a solutions-based company when it comes to the kinds of things they know a lot about. Waterproofing issues, you've got water creeping into your basement or your crawl space, or maybe it's a foundational issue. Those are obviously really scary things when you see those cracks showing up on some of your foundation walls inside your house, outside your house, wherever else. That can be a real problem. Now, sometimes, though, the problems aren't nearly as tough to fix as you might think. When that's the case, ESOG can provide you a simple fix for that. But let's face it, when it's a foundation thing or a waterproofing deal, sometimes these are a little bit more complicated fixes. And if that's the case, then Engineered Solutions of Georgia is the one you want to trust as well, because they've got 2 full-time engineers on staff. Trust me. If it's a foundation issue or something like that, you want the smartest people possible working on that problem. That's what ESOG provides. They've also got great deals for you there as well, whether it be the fully transferable triple protection warranty on materials, installation, design. That's why we like ESOG around here. So if you want to get in touch with the Engineered Solutions of Georgia, here's the number to dial. 678-ESOG now. Dial 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia. All right, busy, kind of expanded edition of our program here today. It's Sean Bailey, the former Georgia wide receiver. That's coming up in just a moment. For now, though, here on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, let's get back to the FCC Championship game. Let's preview that with Mike Griffith.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DogNation.com insider.
Say hello to Mike Griffith. Good stuff from him coming out of Athens over the last couple of days as the Dogs get ready for the LSU Tigers on Saturday. And Mike, interesting piece from you that I read this morning at DogNation.com about the Georgia offense. Interesting kind of comments from Tyler Simmons on that. I know Solomon Kinley also spoke as well about, and this is always that kind of carrot that sort of exists in front of the faces of fans. They always love the idea of a secret collection of plays, kind of a new level of offense to be unveiled in the games that matter most. I, for the most part, have kind of given up on that happening. I like the idea that the players are certainly optimistic that it's going to be a new look against LSU. I've sort of been around the block, though. I'm skeptical of that. But do you think one way or another that Georgia can score enough points to beat LSU on Saturday? Is that threshold of possibility available for the Dogs?
Yeah, I think so, and it's not unreasonable to think there's plays they haven't run. A lot of teams have a lot of plays they just don't get to. They have different packages for every game, and for whatever reason, something's working earlier and they stick with it, and they never really get to that play. So there has been a lot they've practiced they haven't run, and they also study their tendencies. And when they line up a certain way, they run this play, they run this play, they run this play. They self-scout, and then when they play a team like LSU, they say, you know what, we're going to line up this way, and we're going to run a different play out of it. So I don't think I think there will be different plays. I don't think it's stuff they've practiced. It's not like they're reinventing the wheel, but here they can. If they're efficient, BA, I mean, it comes down to execution, and it comes down to what LSU does on defense. I mean, we have to ask ourselves if we're buying that the LSU defense is as good as they look against A&M, or if A&M merely passed out at that stage of the season after losing to Georgia.
So when it comes to my knee-jerk reaction of the Georgia offense this year, to kind of follow up on this conversation, there was a time early in the year when I was probably critical of both the play calling and the execution of those plays. It seems like the last few weeks, though, even though at certain moments the execution may have left something to be desired, the truth is I don't have much of a beef with the play calling anymore. I feel like that Georgia has tried to be creative, tried to get some of the what I think of as possible playmakers involved a little bit more. I mean, they targeted D-Rob 6 times in the first half against Georgia Tech. They seem to be more creative now with how they're trying to use James Cook. It seems like there is, I don't know if it's an evolution or if it's just me liking what I'm seeing a little bit better, but while the execution has kind of left something to be desired, it's actually been a good number of weeks that I've had any kind of real legitimate beef with the play calling one way or another.
Yeah, I can understand that, and I don't know why you would. They haven't lost a game since October 12th. They've been winning football games, and what's there, Jake's taking what's there. And when it's not there, he throws the ball away, or he throws it in a place out of bounds or low where only his guy can get it. That's why he's only had one game with interceptions this year. So I think the offense has evolved. I think getting Kearis Jackson back has certainly helped. The offensive line has come back to help of late. I think that helps as well. So I can understand why you'd be optimistic. The big thing is the LSU's offense is, nobody's really stopped them. I mean, I guess Auburn held them to 23, but they still had over 500 yards.
Yeah, we'll get to the Georgia defensive challenge in a moment because obviously that's a pretty significant one. Let me stay on this topic for one more minute, though, and let me kind of say it this way. I am very much of the belief, and I know as I say this, a lot of fans are not going to like the sound of it, but it's my belief nonetheless, that the recipe for winning this game on Saturday is actually by Georgia leaning into what its identity already is. I think the version of Georgia that wins this game on Saturday is not the sugar-free version of LSU trying to be like them. I think it's trying to be the steroid version of itself, the amped-up, beefed-up, juiced-up version of itself, as physical as possible, running the football, chopping wood in the early going of the game, and reaping the benefits of that hopefully in the second half, and then maybe taking advantage with some big plays through the air. But Georgia being Georgia, I think, if they're going to beat LSU on Saturday, it's Georgia being Georgia that I think is the best chance for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby's going to play to his team's strengths. I mean, he built this team a certain way around the personnel that he has, and you're going to need DeAndre Swift to be effective running the football, there's no doubt. So, yeah, I mean, if they can get to Joe Burrow and hit him and he goes down like they got to Tua last year, whether that's with new plays or new twists on plays, it's still going to stay within the Georgia identity. It's not like they're suddenly going to go empty set and 5 wide and throw the ball, 3 straight downs. They're going to do what they've done all year with a twist and hopefully do it effectively. Jake talked a lot about success on first down. I think it comes down to being able to run the football effectively on first down, and then you put yourself in a good down and distance situation, a 2nd and 5, where you can run or throw and be two-dimensional.
All right, hopefully Mike's cell phone will hold out on us here. We'll got some more questions for him coming up. Let me tell you about a couple quick things, though, while I have a moment. Big stuff going on at Kroger, both today and tomorrow, and really throughout the holiday season. This has been a fun tradition for a while. Kroger welcomes in the legendary former coach and athletic director Vince Dooley to various Kroger locations. He signs copies of his book, takes pictures with the Georgia fans. It's always a lot of fun. And today and tomorrow, a lot of great things going on here. The Kroger location on Turner McCall Boulevard in Rome, that's today from 4 to 6 p.m. 4 to 6 p.m. today. And then tomorrow in Marietta, Georgia on 4880 Lower Roswell Road, also from the same time, 4 to 6 p.m., Coach Dooley going to be signing copies of his various books and just having a good time with some dog fans. So if you're listening radio podcast, you can go to dognation.com. Right up there at the top of the page, you can see the full list of Coach Dooley appearances at Kroger's here this holiday season. Great gift for the people in your life. Tomorrow in Marietta, today in Rome, Coach Dooley signing some copies of his book. See the full list of appearances there at dognation.com. And also, speaking of Kroger and our friends at Georgia United Credit Union, we'll do Road to Atlanta tonight at 6 p.m., continuing our preview of the SEC Championship. And then tomorrow at 6 p.m., it's a big one for us. We're live at the Marlowe's in Peachtree Corners for our Road to Atlanta, presented by Kroger, presented by Georgia United Credit Union, with myself, John Stinchcomb, Jeff Sintel, getting ready there for that one tomorrow night at 6 p.m., 5210 Town Center Boulevard. That's the address. 5210 Town Center Boulevard in Peachtree Corners for Road to Atlanta tomorrow night as we get ready to preview and have a great time talking some Georgia football with John Stinchcomb, Jeff Sintel, me, and hopefully all of you at the Marlowe's in Peachtree Corners tomorrow night. All right, you mentioned DeAndre Swift, Mike. Let me kind of get to Swift here, and it's been really interesting to watch the different kinds of updates that Kirby Smart has given of Swift going back, I guess, over the course of the last 4 days now, starting on Saturday when the first update from Smart was that Swift would be fine. And then on Monday, it turned into hopeful that Swift would play. I thought last night when Smart spoke about this, we got a little bit more detail on the situation, the fact that this is something that Swift's been dealing with now for a little while, and maybe that's kind of the reason why Smart thinks it's so, I guess, manageable for Swift to play with this injury. He's obviously a huge component of the game plan. What have you made of the various updates and the differing degrees of concern that a few of these have generated in terms of Swift's status for Saturday?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, we pretty much have to take Kirby as his word, that practices aren't open. But, if this is something DeAndre's been dealing with all year, that's certainly interesting. He had an relatively effective month in November. You just got to wait and see. I mean, I don't know what to tell you other than what I've written. The guy has had a bruised shoulder for multiple games. He actually injured the shoulder earlier in the game. When he came out, it was actually a culmination of the hits that he'd taken earlier in the game, according to Kirby. So it's hard to say, whether, Kirby's just kind of said it in different ways and it's semantics each time, or if there's been a change in status, or if DeAndre's wishy-washy about whether or not he's going to play. There's really no way to know other than just to read what the coach says and take him at his word.
One of the things I've said here, Mike, is while this has become a team dominated by one running back more than I expected it to, if you want to go back and listen to our preseason conversations, certainly the expectation from me, many of the people who are watching and listening right now, is this was a Georgia team with a lot of running back depth. Now, obviously, you can't sugarcoat how significant it would be for Georgia if Swift is indeed less than 100% healthy. Even if he's playing and just not 100%, that'd be a loss for Georgia, a big loss to one of its key components of its game plan. And yet, I find myself kind of wanting to lean back on some of that preseason conversation of, well, maybe that does become a time for Zamir White to step up and do something a little bit more. Maybe that does become a time for James Cook to kind of show you what some of the buzz was about for him coming out of high school. These are guys that Georgia may be relying on in the 2020 season. Well, this is the 13th game of the 2019 season. It doesn't seem too much to ask something from them when the reins of this running game largely could be turned over to them for the first game of 2020.
Well, I think you'd be asking a lot because I think DeAndre Swift's a first or second round pick, and I think he's a full level better than anybody else they have on the team right now because he can catch the ball and the way he can run, and he's a home run hitter. He can go the distance. I mean, Zamir White has, he's yet to prove he has any vision or running skills. He's got power and strength and certainly drive and motivation, but he misses holes. He ran the wrong way a couple games ago. I don't think I'd want to rely on Zamir White in a game like this. James Cook is interesting because he can catch the ball out of the backfield, but for whatever reason, his opportunities have been limited, and there's been a lot of times when Jake Fromm hasn't even looked his way. Now, Kirby continues to talk up James Cook, but we've yet to see that come to fruition. Now that George Pickens has got himself thrown out of the game for the first half, they need to find some other answers, and whether that's more passes to Tyler Simmons or Matt Landers or James Cook, or I don't think we'll see him throw to Zamir White. I haven't seen him throw to Zamir this year. But to your point, there are other options. Brian Herring has done some good things with his opportunities, but none of these guys at this stage of their career are on the level with DeAndre. We'd be kidding ourselves if we suggested any of them were close to DeAndre Swift at this stage of their career.
Let me finish up with this. You wrote about something this week that I've talked a lot about over the last few days here on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, which is that I feel like that this Georgia defense, one of the things that I think makes it superior to some of the Georgia defenses of the Kirby Smart era, even the 2017 group that led Georgia to the college football playoff, that group was obviously heavily reliant on a superstar, and Roquan Smith for a single season was as much of a superstar as anybody can be. He was just amazing. But what I think gives this defense a chance to shine in a game like LSU, where, let's face it, limiting yards and points for this group is really, really tough to do. The fact that while there is no obvious superstar on this group, there's also no obvious weakness there either. You know, the 2017 defense had some vulnerabilities in its secondary. I thought you could exploit that if you game planned it well enough, and certain teams did at certain times. But this Georgia defense does not have that obvious weakness. Not at linebacker, not at secondary, certainly not at defensive line, which I think is the most improved position group on the team overall. I think this defense, because it's not just 11 no-names, but it's 11 guys who all contributed such a level, it's sort of hard to distinguish one from the other. I think the way in which this defense is constructed, all three levels of it and in the reserves they can play, I think it's constructed in such a way that they might very well be equal to what LSU is going to throw at them on Saturday. I like the way this defense is constructed. I love the idea of the chess match between Kirby and Brady and Ensminger, and the way in which these pieces are going to move around on the playing field against each other on Saturday.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You know, I think there's a lot of depth in the secondary. I think we saw that against Alabama last year. You know, Alabama was a 12-point favorite in this game last year, and nobody played them within 3 touchdowns. And, of course, 2 in that receiving core was pretty amazing also. You know, this cornerback rotation goes at least 3 deep, with Tyson Campbell back healthy, along with DJ Daniel and Eric Stokes. And, you know, LeCount and J.R. Reed have now played together 2 seasons, so there's not a lot of breakdowns. They're very sound as said, a pretty complete team, no weaknesses. They're very assignment sound, and you add some very athletic freshmen into the mix that have contributed. And Trevon Walker, Azeez Ojulari, Nolan Smith, and the junior college transfer Jermaine Johnson. So you've got a few more weapons in that front 7, I think, than you had last year. And I think the secondary is every bit as good. Yes, you lost DeAndre Baker, but you've got a lot more unity back there and experience and better communication. Also think that Monty Rice has stepped up, and Tate Crowder. Here's a couple of other guys that now have 2 years under their belt. So I would agree this is the best defense that LSU's seen, but I would also say that Georgia hasn't seen an offense anything like this in terms of the way LSU is able to spread the field and throw the ball. They've played some very good teams, but nobody that has the type of explosive receivers. So that'll be a key matchup to see how those corners can do against those 2,000-yard receivers, and also how they're able to do against Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the open field, as he's been probably the most effective running back in the league throughout the season.
Mike, good stuff. Appreciate your time. We'll look forward to reading at DogNation.com and talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, PA.
All right, good stuff there from Mike Griffith. And I think the point he's making about the secondary is one that I want to make sure I echo, and I've said this a lot already this week. I think the most important aspect of stopping the LSU offense does rest with the Georgia secondary, not just because you've got to guard guys like Jamar Chase and that really, really impressive collection of LSU wide receivers, but because the willingness and the ability to be physical with those guys at the line, on the snap, bumping them, bodying them up, showing that physicality. This is not the Big 12. This is not going to be one of those games where you get to just sort of run around and run pretty routes all day long without some sort of nemesis in your way. The Georgia secondary is going to be, I think, a thorn in the side of these LSU receivers, and that potentially could give Nolan Smith and Azeez Ojulari and Trayvon Walker and whomever else you want to mention, Tyler Clark, that extra second, and sometimes that extra second or maybe even a half a second. It could be enough to get Joe Burrow on the ground. Watch the physicality from the Georgia defensive backs at the line against the LSU receivers. If Georgia wins, it's because those dudes punch the LSU dudes in the mouth, figuratively speaking, all day long.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
And you're going to have to add the figuratively speaking into the whole punch them in the mouth thing, given some of the recent events around Georgia football. Let's keep that to the figurative language for now. It's Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. We'll hear from Georgia wide receiver, former Georgia great Sean Bailey here coming up in a moment, who had an unbelievable performance for Georgia in the SEC championship game and a win against LSU in 2005. And what a great harbinger that could be for what's going to happen here this upcoming Saturday as well. So we'll reminisce about all of that with Sean Bailey here coming up. Before that, though, it's time to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And I know you need a vacation, and the all-new Amplified Oasis of the Seas is a great way to get that vacation. There's really no cruise vacation like this, really setting the standard for a cruise vacation. That's what Royal Caribbean's been doing for the last 50 years, and it's even bigger and better here in 2019. The Oasis of the Sea is an example of that. All the things that have been added, the Ultimate Abyss, tallest water slide at sea, really fun bar, nightclub type options like Playmaker Sports Bar and Arcade, Music Hall, the Lime and Coconut, which is like 3 stories tall. It's like a tropical oasis, really, right there on the cruise ship. And, of course, the Bionic Bar, which got like the robotic arm bartenders, things like that. It's just an amazing experience, amazing getaway for you, the significant, special someone in your life, family, kids, kind of everything in between. RoyalCaribbean.com is the website. You can find out more about Oasis of the Seas, and you can get in touch with a travel advisor and book the vacation right now that I know you need. It's RoyalCaribbean.com. All right, let's talk playoff top 25 here for a moment. Georgia does stay at 4 last night. I thought our buddy Logan Booker had a good tweet about this. Logan's a radio host on 960 The Ref. I had not really thought about this until Logan said this, but it's 100% true. Georgia winning on Saturday, given where they're ranked right now, there's not like one team in college football that would be helped by that. Like everybody in college football is rooting against Georgia because it makes it for any team that wants to be in the playoff. That task is made harder if Georgia takes one of those spots by beating LSU. For teams like Auburn and Florida who would love the idea of a little bit better pecking order for the bowl, it's obviously easier to imagine that if somehow Georgia were to lose to LSU, especially if it's convincing. You want to talk about a chance to not just help its own cause, but potentially hurt the cause for like every team in college football. I think that Georgia by winning could certainly do that. And by the way, call me a homer if you want. I also think there's teams like Ohio State and Clemson who feel like they're quite solidly in the college football playoff. I don't think they relish the chance of playing this Georgia defense in one of these playoff games there either. So I think there are a lot of teams rooting, a lot of fans, a lot of entities in college football rooting against Georgia. I thought Logan had a pretty good tweet about that. But the Dogs are 4th. The action around Georgia was all around them, and the big story is obviously the fact that Alabama drops to 12th, behind Florida, behind Auburn. I'm no mathematical expert. I tell you all this all the time. But the best I can crunch these numbers, it certainly seems likely, not completely clinched because there's another ranking to come out, but it seems likely that Alabama is not only going to be left out of the playoff, but now left out of the New Year's Six Bowls as well. Orlando or Tampa, something like that, that's where the Crimson Tide is likely going to fall to for its bowl game. And admittedly, I do enjoy this. Georgia's got rivals. Alabama's not necessarily a rival. What Alabama is for Georgia is a nemesis. Georgia's got plenty of rivals, but its biggest nemesis is Alabama. The biggest obstacle in the way of what Georgia wants to do is still the Crimson Tide. With all due respect, LSU winning the SEC West this year and becoming Georgia's opponent for the SEC championship game this Saturday, that doesn't change all that very much. Alabama is still Georgia's number one nemesis. They play them in September, but Alabama being taken down a peg right now, not in the playoff, not in New Year's Six, forced to kind of play at, like 11 a.m. or whatever time it is on whatever day, I guess it is January 1st probably, that one of these Florida Bowls is going to be on against one of these, like, sleepy Big Ten teams. That's good for Georgia in a roundabout way. It's not as good as beating LSU would be, but it's not completely bad either. Seeing Alabama watered down, weakened here, diminished to end the season, I think that does help Georgia in a roundabout way because in the infinite game that is the SEC, competition against Alabama is going to continue, and so it's never a bad thing to see them going through a bad moment. And by the way, on this topic, I guess slightly off, I thought it was interesting yesterday that Clemson coach Dabo Swinney kind of doubled down on his complaints about the way in which that his team has been treated in terms of how it's evaluated for the schedule that it plays and everything that kind of goes along with that. And of course, the genesis for all that was the fact that Paul Feinbaum kind of took some shots at Dabo on ESPN, so Dabo kind of fired back. I don't know. It seems like it'd be awful easy here. With Clemson needing a marquee game, with Georgia kind of questioning the current status of its schedule. Boy, it seemed like it'd solve a lot of problems if Georgia and Clemson were playing every year, wouldn't it? I mean, Georgia gets a chance to play on the field, the team that it's competing with in recruiting and competing with for national championships. Clemson, as I said before, they may be the best team, but they can't be the biggest program because they don't do the thing that makes college football great. They don't play in big games. They haven't even really been a part of the season as of yet. They've been a 3 touchdown or more favorite in like every game but one all year long. They essentially haven't been a relevant part of the college football conversation because they don't play big games. Boy, finding a way to get Georgia and Clemson on the field together a lot more. And I know it's going to happen in a few years, but right now, it's really a shame these two teams can't find a way to make this be maybe Georgia's non-conference yearly rivalry. I think that's such a bad idea, all things being equal. For now, we will make that cruise around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. And coming up in a moment, we will hear from Sean Bailey, the former Georgia wide receiver. Good stuff from him, reminiscing about 2 touchdowns against LSU in 2005, what it felt like to be on the receiving end of those from DJ Shockley, what he thinks about Georgia without Lawrence Cager, why it was that Cager was so effective for the Dogs, and the advice that Bailey, who was always just a really sharp guy when he played at Georgia, what advice he would give to George Pickens now that Pickens is trying to work through a little bit of an issue that's going to keep him off the field for the first half against LSU. That's all coming up. Before that, if you're watching on video, one of the things you see right here on the screen, right here on my desk, it is the Hover helmet. And this time of year, everybody's scrambling to say, what's the best gift to get Uncle Bobby or Grandpa Lou or whoever it is in your family that's hard to buy for. We've all got someone that we just never know what they might want, what they might want to give them. I can tell you that we don't get hardly any feedback better about anything more than these Hover helmets when they're on the desks. Spinning around, floating in midair, it's actually a scientific marvel that I can't even explain how this works and how this does what it does, but it's a really, really fun thing. It just floats and spins, and it's look great in your office or your basement, wherever you might want to put it. And if you go to dognation.com, you go up to the top of the page, you can see more information about Hover helmets there as well. You can also check out hoverhelmets.com/dognation. When you use the promo code DOGNATION, you can save 20% on your order, but you got to act right now on that to get those in time for Christmas. So it's hoverhelmets.com/dognation. Use the promo code DOGNATION, and you can get some big, big savings on a Hover helmet, Georgia, unbelievable holiday gift item. Or if you just want it for yourself, who am I to judge you for that? Check out hoverhelmets.com/dognation. Use the promo code DOGNATION, and you can save 20%. We pre-recorded the interview with Sean Bailey. You're going to like it. Enjoy it now here on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. And here on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, really, really happy to be able to check in with the former Georgia wide receiver, Sean Bailey. Always fun to talk to him on a week like this because I think it brings good vibes around Dog Nation. Sean, a part of a Georgia team that beat LSU in the SEC championship back in 2005, and he's good enough to join us here on our program today. First of all, Sean, thanks for your time. Really appreciate you being with us. And how much fun is it for you to kind of look back on that moment? I'm sure you get asked a lot about that game on a week like this.
Without a doubt, that was a special time, an awesome game. Actually, a lot seems real similar to this year, so it brings back a lot of good memories.
Yeah, we kind of talked about that a little bit on the show this week, the fact that Georgia's an underdog to LSU, and this time, this era of Bulldogs football, the Dogs aren't underdogs to virtually anyone, but against LSU on Saturday, they will be. You guys were also an underdog back in 2005. Some people may have forgotten about that now, but LSU in the first year of Les Miles with Jamarcus Russell quarterback, they were a pretty heavy favorite in that game, and yet you guys, for the most part, controlled it from the start. I guess, what are your memories of kind of going into a game like that, and was there confidence before the game that you guys would play as well as you ultimately did?
Yeah, there was a lot of confidence. It's talked about a lot, taking that underdog role, being able to kind of play free because you don't have a lot of expectations, and having a tight-knit group that I know Kirby has. There's confidence within that building, within that room, and there's not a lot of pressure there as well. So you can relax, you can kind of be free and just go out there and do what you've been doing this whole season.
So when you're kind of locked in the way that you were that day and catching touchdowns from DJ Shockley, I mean, I would imagine that that's a pretty nice feeling for a quarterback and a receiver to be on the same page the way that you guys were on that particular day, and to have it happen on the biggest stage. I don't think there's any atmosphere in college football that's bigger and better than an SEC championship game. I got to imagine that's a pretty nice feeling. When you look back on that, you know, kind of what do you remember about having such a big performance in such a big game like that?
Yeah, I mean, it started, that week in practice. We saw, how aggressive they were. They played a lot of man-to-man, and we knew that we were going to have some shots in that game. And lucky for us, those opportunities came early in the game, and then we were kind of able to snowball off that, and, it was never really contested after that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Let me also kind of, I guess, fast forward to this Saturday's game, and I guess plan on being there in the stadium. That's a pretty tough ticket to get, kind of a nice thing. What do you expect to see go down between Georgia and LSU? And I guess, what would, as a reigning SEC champion yourself, a guy that's won that title in the past, what would you say to this Georgia team about how they get it done against LSU this particular Saturday?
Yeah, it's going to be an incredible atmosphere. I think one of the big advantages for us is that we've been in this game the last couple of years. So a lot of the older guys have been there, done that. Is not going to have those anxious moments that some guys that haven't been there will have. And then of course our defense is playing rock solid. If they can come out and show that presence. Our offense is capable. We haven't been clicking all year, but they're capable of showing up for a big-time game. And I think that we have the stuff to get it done.
Along the lines of the offense, it's been kind of interesting this year to watch when he was healthy, Lawrence Cager, the chemistry that he had with Jake Fromm. It was a different offense when he was on the field. The Miami transfer really kind of provided a nice shot in the arm for the Georgia offense. When he was injured, and he dealt with a number of those injuries during the year, the Georgia offense just wasn't quite the same. And now, of course, we know that because of an ankle injury, Cager won't be able to play in this game on Saturday, nor for Georgia probably the rest of the year, no matter how far the season extends, even to a national championship game. From your perspective, how do you think Georgia overcomes that injury? And I guess I'd be curious, as a former receiver yourself, if you have some insight on what it was that allowed Cager to develop the chemistry with Fromm that he had all season long.
Well, I think the biggest thing is his experience. Coming from Miami, where he played a lot of ball, played in some big games down there. He came in with a lot of wisdom. His size, his length, his ability to get off the press. He was a perfect transfer for us. With us losing the guys we lost last year and being young, he stepped right in and was our go-to guy. I think the thing that helps us now that we're towards the end of the season is that we've had a battle. And these younger guys, Dom and some of these other younger guys that have played in big games and have some big moments. So we're no longer freshmen and sophomores now. At the end of the season, you're the next year up. We're sophomore and juniors. And then it's also good to see Simmons come in and have a good game last game as one of the older statesmen as a receiver.
Sure.
So I think everybody's underlooking the receiver corps, and there's not going to be a lot of pressure on them at all. So I think they can play free, and I think they're going to be able to shock some people.
No, I like the idea of that. Let me finish up with one more thing before we let you go. One of the other stories involving the receiving corps is the fact that George Pickens, who I think of as just a dazzling prospect, and as a freshman, boy, he's really done some good things for UGA, but there's also that temptation to maybe get a little involved with some extracurricular activity from time to time. I know he had the dust-up with the Georgia Tech player on Saturday, and because of that, he's going to be suspended for the first half, and he's apologized to the team. It seems like he's committed to do better in that situation next time. But what would your advice be to him as a guy who kind of went through the ringer as an SEC receiver? How those defensive backs are always jawing at you and pawing at you and trying to kind of get you off your game. If you're George Pickens, how do you handle that and make sure the next time something like that happens, it doesn't turn into kind of a fist fight situation that takes Pickens off the field?
Right. Well, I think the best thing about George Pickens is it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Sure.
He plays with a lot of emotion, a lot of passion, and if it's channeled the wrong way, it can hurt us. But if it's channeled the right way, he's explosive. He's a guy that's going to be an early draft pick, and he's a game changer. So it's just taking this and learning from this experience, and learning how to channel that energy and passion in the right direction. And I think if he comes back in the second half, he's going to be explosive and ready to go. He's going to have a lot of energy boiling, and we just got to make sure that he's focused in these challenges, channeling it in the right direction.
Well, Sean, we're big fans of yours. We love your thoughts on the current Georgia team. We love looking back on your career with you there as well. 2 touchdowns in the 2005 SEC Championship that led Georgia to a victory over LSU. Sounds like a good idea to go back and do that again in Atlanta on Saturday. I'm glad you're going to be there to see it. We really appreciate you being here on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, to preview it all, and hope you have a great week and hope you enjoy the game on Saturday.
Yes, thank you, and go Dogs.
Great stuff there from Sean Bailey, man. I really love him. Great moment for me, remembering back on that 2005 SEC Championship game, and a lot of fun to think that Georgia might be able to get that done again on this Saturday there as well. So really fun stuff there. By the way, something else going to be really fun tomorrow. I want to make sure you're aware of this 6 p.m. Marlowe's Peachtree Corners for our Marlowe's matchup / Road to Atlanta, presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union. It's the Peachtree Corners location, 5210 Town Center Boulevard. It's myself, John Stinchcomb to talk about the game, Jeff Sintel to talk about recruiting. It's the biggest Marlowe's event of the year. It's tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Peachtree Corners location, 5210 Town Center Boulevard. All right, a couple other things to take care of here. Georgia has a basketball game tonight. We'll look forward to seeing how this team looks on the heels of having been at Maui. 5-star running back Zachary Evans was supposed to announce his commitment today. He's not going to do that. I don't think Georgia's a factor here probably at all, but at least wanted you to be aware of that. Also, Gator Hater Updater, 1,131 days. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down, and I was conversing with J.D. Brandon on Twitter a moment ago, who says that during our comment section, I always take a lot of YouTube comments, I always take a lot of Facebook comments, but I don't typically take a lot of Twitter comments. And admittedly, I haven't played around with this as much as I should, but my experience on this is the comments going to disappear. So JD and others who watch on Twitter, I know some of you do, the one thing I consistently hear is that people actually like the video platform, that it works really well. Sometimes, just to be completely honest, Facebook video causes a little bit of an issue. Facebook is not primarily a video-based company, so therefore some of their video stuff can be an issue. Some of you sometimes hear the sound go out. That's actually not on us. We make plenty of errors, but that's not typically us. That's typically just the Facebook video platform causing some problems. So one of the things I do here is people like watching the show on Twitter. For whatever reason, they just think it's a good quality video experience, much the same way, for the most part, we get positive reviews on YouTube in terms of what that video experience is like. The comment section for me is a little bit difficult on that, so I am going to work on that, JD, try to learn a little bit more about that. That is not something, though, that I have spent a lot of time with, and the experience that I have had, it just got sort of hard to see them and kind of hard to get going with all that. By the way, for the first time this week, our buddy Connor Riley is going to be with us. We'll get a chance to hear from him coming up in just a minute. Let me also kind of dial up some of your comments. We'll get rolling in all of this. And, of course, it's all brought to you and made possible by our friends at R.S. Andrews. Air, heating, plumbing, electric, all of those things R.S. Andrews is really good at doing. And the way they do it puts a smile on your face. So if your water heater goes out, that's a frown. But R.S. Andrews can turn it into a smile. If your electricity is not working, let's face it. At my house right now, we've got like 9 gazillion, roughly speaking, cords plugged into like however many outlets. That's just a lot of strain on the whole electrical situation there. I don't know much about that. So if something goes wrong with that, R.S. Andrews can put a smile back on your face. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles. They can deliver one for you as well, but you've got to check them out at rsandrews.com. We'll get Connor here. It sounds like he's about to hop on. I'll also continue to pull up our Facebook comments and our YouTube comments and kind of get rolling on that. I had not already pulled those up in the show, so y'all give me a second. We'll get rolling. We'll start on Facebook here today and get some thoughts from some folks on how they think the game's going to play out on Saturday. Connor, how you feeling here on this Wednesday?
Doing all right, just trying to make it to Saturday. Busy week, long week. We got a lot of shows today. Been in Athens the last 2 days, but looking forward to Saturday. Days like Saturday are why we do this job.
No doubt about that. I don't want to overstate this, but in terms of what is fun about life, it's really a collection of moments that makes life fun, and really SEC championship games, things like that, one way or another, the kinds of moments you remember forever. I mean, when you look forward to the season, what you're really looking forward to are moments like these where maybe it's a little hard to sleep the night before. Maybe you wake up just really, really excited, almost like it's a Christmas morning type thing. You get a few of those dates every year. The SEC Championship is one of those. A lot to be gained if you win. Obviously, tremendous heartache if you lose, but you can't be winning it if you're not in it, and that's what Georgia's going to try to get a chance to do on Saturday there.
Yeah, you'd rather be Georgia right now, even with the uncertainty about how to sort of attack this LSU team, than a Citrus Bowl-bound Alabama team.
Yeah, listen, there's nothing wrong with being a fan. You don't have to be like a robot, objective about everything. You just don't. It's okay to sometimes just like stuff. Bama going to the Citrus Bowl, I just kind of like it. Objectively, I don't think they're the 12th best team in the country, but the fact that they're getting treated that way because they've played and beaten no one, I think is quite entertaining. I find it to be quite enjoyable. If we had a tournament of all 130 FBS teams, no, I don't believe Alabama would finish 12th. I don't. But do I think they're deserving of being ranked higher than they are? Probably not. And do I think it's fun to think about them waking up at 11 a.m. to play in Orlando or Tampa or somewhere like that? Yeah, I guess I think it's probably pretty fun. And in a roundabout way, it benefits Georgia in the infinite game it's playing against the Crimson Tide. So I am all about it, Connor. I am all about it.
One, I definitely think the committee, by dropping Alabama 12 spots because it lost by 3 on the road with a backup quarterback, even though Oklahoma State only drops 4 spots because it lost by double digits at home with a backup quarterback to Oklahoma, says a little something about the committee trying to grease the wheels there for the Big 12. And as far as Alabama's bowl game, God help whatever poor, hapless opponent they happened to face that day. Because the last time Alabama was in a game like this was against Michigan State back in 2010, and it was one of the more disturbing things I've ever seen in my life on a football field. I mean, Alabama could have won 1,000-0 that day if they wanted to.
Funny comment from Rick Wallace. Sean Ramey says, what do you say? If we're tired or leading at halftime, I believe we will win. And so, Sean, here's what I'll say in response to that. One of the things I hinted at pretty strongly yesterday is don't assume that Georgia has to, like, jump out to a big lead to win this game. The idea that, well, if LSU gets off to a fast start, therefore Georgia can't win. It's one of the reasons why I don't want Georgia embracing the underdog role. If you decide you are the underdog, and then if you start losing the game early, I think there's a temptation to say, well, we must be underdogs for a reason. When really, some of the best Georgia performances of the Smart era actually confound the prominent paradigm that somehow Georgia lets go of leads late, plays worse as games go on. You can cite games where that's been true, but in the Rose Bowl of 2017, that was not true. Georgia came back from a big deficit. In the SEC Championship of 2017, Georgia in a close game pulled away late from Auburn. In the Florida game of 2018, close game that Georgia pulled away over the course of the 4 quarters. So, Seth, I understand where you're coming from, that Georgia will win the game, you say. If it has that lead at halftime, it'll hold on to it for the full game. But I'm really of the belief that there's a chance that Georgia won't have the lead at halftime, that may face a deficit early in this game, and even in that moment, I won't completely lose my confidence that Georgia can win the game. You'll never hear me say they will win. I'm not sure enough to say that. But in terms of they can win the game, even if Georgia's down a little bit early, I still think that's a deficit for which they can come back. I think it's a broken storyline that Georgia has definitely lost the game once they're trailing. I don't think it's quite as easy to predict as that.
You probably remember this pretty well. Do you remember what the score was at halftime the last time Georgia and LSU played in an SEC championship game?
I actually, yeah, it was the 2011 game. Georgia was leading in that.
Georgia was leading 10-7 at halftime of that game. Do you remember what the final score was?
Like 45-10 or something like that.
42-10.
Yeah, that's
just
tough.
an absolute bloodletting. I lost a good amount of money on that game way back in the day when I was a senior in I was a senior in high school when that game happened. So the whole, Georgia's got to go, take a lead, strike early, build momentum over the course of the game. They did that last year against Alabama and ran out of gas. I don't necessarily think that they have to start fast, but I do kind of think that in that first half especially, and I think they're probably wise to do this over the course of the game, is kind of shrink the game down, do what they did against Florida, where in that first half they were able to sustain long drives and sort of shorten the game, shorten the number of possessions both teams had. I think that's going to be, and I know that's typically a recipe for an underdog, but I just think with the way Georgia wants to play, you don't want to give the LSU offense more bites at the apple, and I think the easiest way to do that is by sustaining long drives and shortening the clock.
Tyler Mash says on YouTube, I actually believe LSU jumps out to a 14-0 lead and then doesn't do anything else the rest of the half. I think it's a 14-13 game at the half, so it's a very specific prediction from Tyler. Listen, here's what I believe. I think it's impossible to shut down LSU completely for a full game. I just don't think it can be done. So therefore, LSU is going to get something at some point in time. Here's the thing you have to understand. If we stipulate what I just said is true, that LSU is going to get something at some point in time, it's just as likely to occur at any moment of the game. I think the media sometimes, one of the biggest mistakes that we have a tendency to make is we get fooled by randomness. If something happens at the beginning of the game, a narrative is constructed of, well, so-and-so starts slow. If points get scored near the end of the game, so-and-so can't close the deal. So-and-so can't finish. The truth is it's a 60-minute game, and good things or bad things are as likely to happen at any point in time in the game. It's not necessarily tied or connected to the fact the game just started or the game just ended. So LSU jumping out to a 14-0 lead, something like that, that could happen. My advice to you would be don't give up easy. Don't assume it's over with. Don't assume it's done with. I have sat in the stadium and watched Georgia come back from more harrowing games than that against offenses just as explosive as this. I'm not telling you it's definitely going to happen, but don't assume it's definitely not, even if the early going of the game on Saturday does not feel great. If you treat yourself like the underdog, you'll assume there's a reason you are the underdog once Georgia's trailing, and that's the wrong mindset to have on Saturday.
I shouldn't bring up that last week before the SEC championship game, you called this show Underdog Nation Daily, correct? We should just leave that in the past,
Did
right?
we do that last year?
We did. You did do that last year. You were very much embracing the underdog role last year.
I forgot all about that. Listen, it's whatever storyline works for whatever we're trying to get done. That's actually a really good point. I completely forgot all about that.
But different circumstances.
It is different circumstances.
You know, that Alabama team, in my estimation, I think was a better team. The 2018 Alabama team was a better team than the 2019 LSU team that Georgia is going to face next week. But weirdly enough, and I said this on our postgame show on Saturday, I was more confident about Georgia going into that game than I necessarily am about Georgia going into this game.
Is that right? So, first of all, I agree with you. I do think last year's Alabama was likely better than this team. I'm talking about LSU. I am always of the belief. I don't like giving them credit for anything. I really don't. But Alabama is always the most difficult team to beat in college football. They haven't been the best team in either of the last 2 years, but still the toughest to beat. I think that's probably true. It just takes a lot to beat Alabama. Look how much it took for Auburn to beat them this past Saturday. It takes a lot to beat Alabama. So I don't disagree with you in saying that on paper 2018 Bama may be better than 2019 LSU. Don't necessarily disagree with that. But in terms of your feeling that Georgia was more set up to win the game last year as opposed to this year, what's that based on?
I just sort of the feeling around this team. I was fairly confident in Georgia more. I was more confident in Georgia's offense last year. I thought they were playing better during the month of November offensively than they did this month, and there's a variety of reasons for that. I don't think the offensive line has been quite as good as it was a year ago, and as great as the defense is, I just think there are necessarily more questions about the offense. But LSU's defense is not as good as Alabama's defense was a season ago, and for all the nitpicking we've done about Jake Fromm, and fans will, ignorant fans will protest this, but in big games, Fromm has shown up. He absolutely balled out against Florida. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions against Auburn. Last year in the SEC championship game, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns against Alabama. Against Oklahoma in the 2017 Rose Bowl, 250-ish yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. When Georgia has absolutely needed him in the biggest games they've played each season, he has showed up, and I'm led to believe that he's going to do that again. As much as his numbers are down this year, I really don't necessarily put a whole lot of this on him.
But the one thing I do believe for Saturday is, and I'm curious to get your opinion and everyone's opinion, we'll take some comments on this. As I said to Mike Griffith a moment ago, I actually don't even want to hear all that much about, the secret play is going to get pulled out for Saturday.
Yeah.
I agree with John Stinchcomb. And Stinchcomb said this on the show. He's texted me this before. You are what you put on film. The idea that there's this reservoir of Georgia offense they haven't put on film as of yet. A lot of these games that Georgia was in, they were in dangerous territory of losing. If they had secret plays, they would have called them then. They just would have. So I don't want to believe in secret plays. In fact, I don't even believe they're necessary. Connor, I said this yesterday during our R.S. Andrews Cool Down, and I'll say it loud enough for you to hear me right now. I believe the way that Georgia wins this game on Saturday is not trying to be a sugar-free version of what LSU is, but a roided-up version of what it is. Be the physically tougher team. Push LSU around. Run the ball. Stop them from running. The kind of boring stuff that people hate. But that is who Georgia is. And if it wins on Saturday, I really believe that a large portion of that pie as to why they win is because Georgia found a team it could be Georgia against.
So to that point, the whole secret plays thing, I think is kind of bunk, because you could just as easily say, well, yeah, LSU probably has a few plays they've had in their back pocket for a game like this as well. And
gosh, I hope not.
I hope they're bad plays.
Start running. Joe Brady, start running the bad plays.
So having said all that, last year I think back to that game. There was a ton of talk going in. Well, you got to pressure Tua in Georgia. Coming into that game, I would believe was last in the SEC in sacks. But DeAndre Walker, as an individual, had showed over the course of the year that individually he could win his one-on-one matchups as a pass rusher and bring down the quarterback. He just, the way Georgia chose to use him last year wasn't always to that benefit. And in that game, they said, all right, DeAndre, we know you can do this. Just do it all the time now. And it worked. And I think you're going to have to see something like that on Saturday, where we've seen sort of things in spurts, whether it be, James Cook on the outside, Dominic Blaylock slots over the middle, DeAndre Swift getting more involved in the passing game. Defensively, you do see a lot more Tyson Campbell, Eric Stokes, DJ Daniel, maybe even the nickel. You see Tyreek Stevenson on that third down blitz package coming from the corner from the star spot. It's, to John's point, it's things you have seen on tape before, but it's just a more concentrated version of it.
I agree with all of that. I believe that we could see, to move the defense for a moment, a guy playing nickel that we don't typically see there just because this is a best 11 on the field type game. And so while, a guy like Webb's great at stopping the run when he's playing that fifth defensive back spot, when you really think LSU is going to throw, having a guy like Daniel on the field with what you hope is a healthy Tyson Campbell and a healthy Eric Stokes, I think that becomes a part of the equation on Saturday. But let me kind of dive a little bit deeper on this. And I've written this for one of the cover fours that's going to pop up on DogNation.com this week. Here's a lot of what I'm hanging my hat on, then I promise we're going to get a lot of comments. LSU is giving up about 3.8 yards per carry this year. That kind of keeps them outside the top 30 in yards per carry allowed, despite the fact they've only played two teams in the top 25 of yards per carry offense. You follow me on this?
Yes.
They've not been a great defense against the run, despite the fact they haven't exactly faced a murderer's row of rushing offenses. That is my vulnerability. The little thing in Star Wars and the Death Star that you shot the thing through and the whole Death Star blew up?
No.
That is my weakness. That's what the Botham Spies have brought to us.
Yeah.
That little bit of vulnerability of not only has LSU not been a great rushing defense, they haven't been a great rushing defense despite the fact they haven't exactly been playing the nation's best rushing offenses. I got to do something with that. Anthony Spano on YouTube says, does that mean a conservative game plan? I kind of think it does, and I'm not trying to troll you by saying that, but for the most part, I do think conservative kind of works here against LSU, and if that doesn't, then the odds are nothing will.
Yeah, to your point, Georgia's got to play Georgia football to win on Saturday. I think the way this team is built, it is kind of a perfect foil to that of LSU. I think they've got the secondary to match up and hold up there. I think they do on passing down situations. I think they do have the pass rushers to really affect Joe Burrow. The biggest thing, and the thing that I worry about and the thing to watch, it's happened a few times. Jermaine Johnson, Nolan Smith, Azeez Ojulari, when they get their hands on Burrow, they have to bring him down. They can't. Alabama let him wiggle out and make and create some plays, and I believe There were 5 chances for Alabama where they had a hand on him and could have sacked him and did not. And those 5 plays turned essentially what would have been, I think, negative 60 yards in sacks to 98 positive yards for LSU, essentially a 140-yard swing, which is huge in games of this magnitude.
And just to be clear, I thought Anthony Spano's comment was a really good one. I think it sets us up for we kind of need to go here. Devin Glenn also likes what he's hearing from Connor. So let's go through a bunch of comments here and get a good number.
For the record, I do understand. I do obviously get the Death Star reference.
Oh, of course.
I just don't want to
keep
people on their toes.
You're a red-blooded American male, Connor.
Yeah.
I expect you to get that. Stuart Nix on YouTube says, you want to win? Keep Burrow off the field. When he's on the field, keep him on his back. We have to contain him as well. Bama sacked him 5 times, but he gave up 64 yards rushing, but also gave up 64 yards rushing to Burrow. That cost him. I'll tell you what else, Stuart, to add to that. Cole Kublik had a good tweet about this. And, he watches the film obviously pretty closely. He kind of cited some examples when Alabama rushed Burrow. I'm talking about, tried to get a blitz pressure or something on him. Didn't get there. What Burrow also did through the air when Alabama tried to bring pressure and didn't get to him. That's why I say, defensively, watch those defensive backs. If they're smacking guys in the mouth at the line of scrimmage, then the chance is you may get the extra 3/4 of a second you need to get an effective pass rush. And if those guys are just dusting that off and, running on down the field to run their pretty little routes, then honestly we can just make dinner reservations and go have a dinner and start talking about 2020.
And Georgia's got to get pressure with 5 at most.
Yeah.
They've got to, Tyler Clark's got to win a battle. Trayvon Walker's got to hold up blocks. If and when they do bring that 5th guy, it's got to be, sort of like Tyreek Stevenson in that Georgia Tech game where it's a delay. He's got a clear path. And again, when Georgia gets home and they get hands on Burrow, they have to bring him down. If you fail to do that, Burrow is absolutely going to destroy this Georgia team if the Bulldogs fail to do that.
I think that's true. Christian Lawrence says, I feel confident in our backs to step up if Swift is out. So let me respond to that. Christian, I want to hear from Connor on this too. I don't know that I would describe myself as confident of what Zamir and Cook will do if DeAndre Swift is limited in this game. But if you're going to ask them to be the lead dogs in 2020 along with Kendall Milton, then it doesn't seem too much of an ask to say, could you also step up in the 13th game of 2019 there as well? I mean, we're only a couple of months away from them being the running backs for the Georgia Bulldogs along with Milton and McIntosh. I mean, it's going to be their team next year. So if that be the case then it doesn't seem like you're just sort of grasping at straws to say, oh, could you also shoulder, no pun intended, a little extra load against LSU here in the SEC championship game? If you can't do it in this game, then what in the world are you going to do in 2020?
DeAndre was just playing on Saturday. I can't say with certainty how effective he'll be, but I do think it's telling that Swift went down with the left shoulder injury after he had his second fumble of the game, and you wonder if maybe it was more him, playing up the injury in that moment because he did have a second costly fumble there. So with all that being said, I do think you're going to see a healthy dose of Swift in this game. And furthermore, I think you need a special play from one of Cook, Harrion, or White.
Yeah.
Something that they're not game planning for. As good as LSU is and as much as we know about the Georgia offense, Zamir White's not a guy you're spending time, you're devoting a ton of time in practice game planning for. Brian Harrion is not a guy you were devoting a ton of time to game plan for. James Cook maybe a little bit, but not a significant amount. You see him on the field, you sort of just assume he's going to get the football. One of those 3 guys, and heck, maybe it could even be Kenny McIntosh. One of those 3 guys is going to have to make a play or two that they have not traditionally made this year. We've seen flashes from those guys, but they're going to have to do it in a really big game.
Steve Bond's got a good comment on Facebook. I want to read that. Let me respond to Connor real quick. One of the things that makes me a little nervous, and listen, Kirby Smart doesn't have an obligation to tell me anything. He just does. And he needs to say whatever he needs to say to win the game, I guess. But Smart hasn't always been particularly forthcoming with DeAndre Swift. We found out secondhand, or actually I guess it came from Swift, but the groin surgery from last year when Smart over and over again said Swift is fine, Swift is fine, Swift is fine. So the track record of Smart and talking about Swift in particular does make me a little nervous. I agree with you. I'm sure that Swift will play, but I'm not sure that he's going to be 100% healthy, and I'm not quite so sure, and I hate to say it this way, but the comparison to Kerryon Johnson in 2017, I'm not quite so sure that's miles and miles away from being a fair comparison, the way that Kirby Smart kind of laughed at it when it was brought up to him on Sunday in the teleconference. I hope what Smart said then is true, but I can't be sure that it is.
Yeah.
Steve Bond on Facebook says, talked about Trey Hill needing to hold the middle there. And, Connor, I know you've written about the 2018 game here this week. I think pound for pound, it may be, and this is saying a lot given what happened in South Carolina this year, that may be the worst Georgia performance of the Kirby Smart era, at least since 2017 when the engine kind of really got up and running. It was just a bad day for Georgia all the way around. And I thought that Dave Aranda won the day out coaching the Georgia offensive side by what he seemed to be doing in the interior of that defense. Braden Fehoko is a good player. I thought that Aranda used him well that day. Obviously, it was Lamont Gilliard that had some trouble there in the interior of that offensive line on that day against the Tigers. That can't happen on Saturday. Nope. If that be the case, then once again we're going to dinner. When we're talking about recruiting, you gotta win the interior offensive line battle on Saturday. If not, then Merry Christmas, everybody, because that's all that we got left.
And I think Fromm and this offensive staff, now obviously Chaney is not here, but most of it is. I believe that was maybe their first time really facing off against Aranda, and there's a reason I believe he's the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football. I do think that, and they've said they sort of use Jake Fromm's mental abilities and his willingness to check in and out of plays against him in that day on that day. I do wonder, I have a good feeling this team is going to be a lot more prepared for what Aranda is going to try and throw at them this time around than last year.
I wonder if there's a way, you bring up a good point, that because Fromm is smart, they try to use that against him, giving him a lot to think about. I wonder if there's a way to kind of turn the tables on that. Do you remember the moment in the Alabama-LSU game this year when Tua would look to the sideline, LSU would look to the sideline, Tua caught him looking, snapped the ball, and threw it. I think it was either a long completion or it was a touchdown because the LSU guys had looked to the sideline every time that Tua did the check with me stuff, and so Tua kind of faked it and threw it. I don't know. Maybe it's something like that where smart coaches have a tendency to want to coach every dribble. That's a basketball phrase, but in football, whatever the football version of that is, if Aranda's trying to get a little too, coachy, maybe you take advantage of that and try to catch the LSU defense stiffening up in a moment when they need to be a little more free-flowing.
And, we've seen Georgia have success this year when they go hurry up, when they go 2-minute. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to do that at some point, in a non-traditional setting to throw off this LSU defense and sort of keep them on their heels. It's probably going to be in the second half, just given the weapons that they probably have at their disposal, but I don't think it'd necessarily be a bad idea and sort of force, and sort of remove Aranda from the equation, because when you're going hurry up, he's not getting time to see what they're doing and moving guys and chess pieces around, and it sort of gives Fromm the upper hand there. I do wonder if we see that a little bit more. As much as we've said, Georgia maybe wants to play a more conservative, slow it down type of game.
All right, we're going to get ready to get off the air here in a minute. Huey Clark asked a really good question. He says, how often has Fromm been sacked comparison to LSU? Now, it's not fair to compare just the sacks alone because LSU obviously throws it a lot more. My assumption is LSU, therefore, has gotten more sacks. Let's do sack rate, which is percentage of passing plays that result in sacks. Georgia, in sack rate, y'all give me just 1 second, is 5th in the country, giving up a sack 2.1% of the time. Obviously, a lot fewer passing plays, but 2.1% of the time, that results in a sack. LSU is, 8. No, I'm sorry, that's not right. Yeah, 71st in the country, giving up sacks 6.3% of the time. So that's not total number of sacks. That's going to be skewed in favor of LSU because teams who throw the ball more are bound to give up more sacks. Does giving up a sack 6.3% of the time, 71st best in the country, which puts you below the 50th percentile nationwide, does that give you some hope for Saturday?
So yes and no. Yes, because that means that I do think Georgia has an opportunity there and an advantage to exploit. But this LSU offense is so good that, is there really a big difference between 3rd and 6 and 3rd and 11? Is there a huge, with just given how good and prolific this offense can be? I do think that maybe some of that might be mitigated by just the explosiveness of LSU's offense.
Hope not. Here's what I'll say. And this is kind of an off-the-wall thing. I'd actually be okay assuming that Georgia's not in field goal range. If Fromm takes a sack on Saturday because he's trying to wait and see if something happens, or if he's trying to do another read down the progression, if Georgia's on its own 35-yard line, he gets sacked back to the 25 trying to make something happen, I'd kind of be okay with that if it means setting up for the chance at a big play. Now, it can't happen a million times, but
no one's ever been sacked a million times in a game.
That's actually probably true. I'm gonna be fine if that happens a little bit. All right, let's do rapid fire and we're gonna go off the air. Thomas Simpson says, "Let LeCount loose." If Georgia wins, my guess is LeCount has a big day because he has become a big part of this thing for Georgia. Also had a pick in last year's SEC championship game. Barry Gully says 46% for LSU will throw a pick. Georgia probably needs a turnover on Saturday.
Georgia probably needs a few turnovers on Saturday.
Don't make it a few. Can we agree that one turnover changes this game? If Georgia needs two, I don't know. I mean, I feel like one turnover can be enough as long as it's a +1 on the turnover margin.
I think LSU beat Alabama this year because they had, I believe, a +2 in the turnover margin in that game.
All right, let's get a couple more here. And Nikme Odoku, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologize. I'm sure I butchered it. Says, Jake Fromm, quote, "Nobody cares, work harder." That's the T-shirt that Lamar Jackson's been wearing, and I got to admit, that's a really good T-shirt to wear because there is no better advice in all of life. Nobody cares about your problems. Nobody cares about your story. Nobody cares about anything. Just work harder. Something tells me that that's the mindset that Georgia's probably taking this week. Who's hurt? Who's whatever? Who's blah, blah, blah? Nobody cares. Just work harder. And that, I would say, is something that Georgia's been pretty good about. I love the Jackson T-shirt that he's been wearing. I'm assuming that's what's in reference to, and it's probably pretty good advice for Georgia on Saturday.
Rule number 76, play like a champion, no excuses.
What's that from?
Wedding Crashers.
Oh, okay. Dustin Williams said you got a half chortle from me at one point in time there. Maybe so. Maybe so. A couple quick ones here. Where are we going to go? Denise Borstein says, I have a confidence that the Dogs will show up. We might not win, but we've won. We might not win pretty, but we've won. So for all the negative Nellies out there, armchair quarterback, she's obviously down on them. And I think it's going to be a day on Saturday for Georgia fans to enjoy themselves and just sort of hope for the best. I love the way that George Foster said this. Can we just let the game play out? Can we just let it play out and see what happens? Whether you're a pundit who thinks you know or a fan who wants to justify some previous opinions, can we just let it play out on Saturday? Brian McPhail
Do you
said,
think, I have a question, somebody brought this up on YouTube. Do you think we see a fake kick or a fake field goal or a fake punt in this game?
So I have what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever the word is. I am very consistent on this. I don't like trick plays at all. If I'm McNeese State against LSU, I might call a trick play. If I'm Georgia, I just run some regular stuff. I just do. Now, the fake punt last year wasn't the reason that Georgia lost the game. Georgia faked the punt because they were in danger of losing the game. I don't want to relitigate that as it is. But I am not a fan of fakes. I just don't like them. I don't like trick plays. I like regular plays.
Is a flea flicker a trick play?
No, a flea flicker's fine. A trick play, I mean, that's a wrinkle, right? Like a trick play is I would say a halfback option pass is more of a trick play. A flea flicker, I mean, that shows. Listen, if Georgia runs it on the regular, it can't be that tricky because Georgia doesn't do a whole lot of tricky stuff. Earl Watt says home field advantage. I have heard, somebody sent this to me on Twitter, that the secondary market's not exactly robust right now. I'm not surprised by that. LSU fans are just different. There are a lot of them. Sometimes they can be hard to find. It's a kind of a long drive for some of them in here to Georgia. So the idea that there's going to be as many LSU fans as there are Alabama fans, say like the last year where it's only about a 3-hour drive from Tuscaloosa, my assumption is there will be fewer LSU fans. Will there be Georgia fans to take their place? Will this be a decided home field advantage for Georgia on Saturday, and will it matter? Connor, your thought?
I think there was a home field advantage last year when they played Alabama in that game, and I do kind of think, given that the ticket prices are down just because it's not Alabama or Auburn and the distance is there, and, I know you don't feel like they're in, but I feel like the general consensus is that win or lose, LSU is in the playoff, and there is certainly a chance, I think, that some LSU fans may be saving their money for that potential first playoff game instead. So, and especially with the possibility of them playing in Atlanta once again. So, I do think there is a potential here for Georgia fans, not to completely take over because I do think there will be a good amount of LSU fans there, but I do think there's potential there for not a true home field advantage, but a significant advantage there.
Anthony Spano says, now this is something I do like. He says we should flip the script and go for it on fourth down. Yeah, I don't like fake punts and fake field goals. I really like going on fourth down, and a good team ought to go for it on fourth down more often than it doesn't, I believe, and so I'm right there with you on that.
LSU went 4 for 4 last year when they played Georgia on fourth down.
Good point.
It was a big factor in that game.
So you brought this up, so we'll finish with this. Do you think LSU is in the playoff no matter what?
Yes.
How is that not an advantage for Georgia? How is that not an advantage for Georgia to have a team essentially that has nothing to play for?
I said last week I think LSU was treating Texas A&M like their Super Bowl, just given what it could potentially mean and sort of what happened with A&M last year, and they certainly came out and played like it was their Super Bowl. And so I will be interested to see maybe where this LSU team is at mentally, just as far as there is a not unreasonable level of confidence that win or lose, they should be in the playoff.
Bearded Dog asked about jerseys. Georgia will be wearing red on Saturday. LSU in its customary white. TM says, why would you not go at Fort Regular on fourth down? You're playing the chances. Totally agree with that.
It's math.
Dana Fingirl says, and I think this is perfect, that I wonder what Mullen's going to be doing on Saturday. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, Dan Mullen going to be having a pretty good time watching this one on TV, which is exactly where he should be. Cliff Payne says, don't think LSU wants as much as Georgia does. Boy, I'm going to tell you this right now. I'll take it however it comes. Yep. A distracted LSU, a complacent LSU. I will make no apologies for however this win comes its way. Devin Glenn on Tommy Bush. I know Bush is back healthy again. I just don't see Bush as part of the rotation right now. Now, that may change for 2020, but for right now, even healthy, I think that Georgia's going to play the other receivers that it's got a lot more. And you know what? I've kind of come around on Tyler Simmons. I believe that Tyler Simmons may actually be my guy in the first half on Saturday. That's how quickly it can change. One good game, even against a...
2 good games. He played well against A&M.
Okay, but a lot of this for me is based on the Tech game. Even against that opponent, meager as it is, that's how quickly it can kind of turn around. All of a sudden, I'm on the Tyler Simmons bandwagon for a Saturday.
I've got a story coming out on a guy later this week who I think is my guy in the Georgia passing game.
Can't wait to read that.
What we call a tease.
Can't wait to read that. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right, Andrew Hughes on the subject of the playbook. Yeah, we talked about it a little earlier. You know, I know players love the idea of we got so much we haven't yet thrown out there. I appreciate they would certainly know better than me. My guess is, though, that Georgia on Saturday is going to look a lot like it has in the past, but hopefully the version of itself that allows it to win. That's my, I guess, sort of best answer on that. It's probably not the most popular answer, but that's kind of the way that I feel on that. We have got to go. Devin Glenn thinks you'll be writing by Dominic Blaylock, which is kind of a funny thing all the way around. Ken AV guy says, just got to play smart ball and execute. Would totally agree with that. How about one more from Facebook before we get off the air? Matt Talley says, all would be forgiven. I take everything back about Simmons if he can have a big day on Saturday. And I think a lot of people are going to be saying the same thing. Look, experience matters in a game like this. It really does. And we'll all admit, you know, there are lists of guys who probably have not had quite the season that they would have liked to have had. Certainly, there are guys who haven't had the seasons that Georgia fans would have liked for them to have. But, and I'm going to be a broken record on this, leaders are repeaters. And this is a statement I'm going to repeat a lot. If things go well for Georgia, there are 3 more games left in the season. Over the totality of a 15-game year, that means 20% of the season is yet to be played. That is a lot of chapters in a book to still be yet be written for the quarterback, for the receivers, for the blah, 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 and the blah, 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 and James Coley and whomever else. There is a lot of storyline, a lot of plot that could not be written as of yet. So let's see how it plays on Saturday, and Lord willing, 2 more games beyond that. Okay. Huge thanks to the AJC for making Atlanta News Now available to us every single day online at ajc.com. There is, many of you are aware, Senator Johnny Isakson is retiring. There's a replacement coming for him. Good coverage of that at the AJC. You can check out on that. Also, some new stuff coming to SunTrust Park where the Braves play in time for 2020. And some really good gift card deals this time of year, too. You can check out more of that at ajc.com, too. And really check in throughout the day to get your Atlanta News Now at ajc.com. I appreciate you being here for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily. Also today, don't forget, it is, what is today? what's the show called? Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Jeff and me talking recruiting. Coming up at 3 p.m. today. We'll be at Marlowe's tomorrow at 6. I'll have Road to Atlanta tonight at 6 p.m. It is quite a week for us here at Dog Nation, but it's what we live to do. Bring you coverage of the big games like the SEC Championship. So I'll see you at 3, I'll see you at 6, and probably 100 times in between now and then. And, of course, back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. You have a great day, everybody.